Us wargamers are spoiled, in a lot of ways. I mean, look at all them models out there. But when it comes to paint, we have even more choices. Our hobby might be niche, but there is no end of paint products made specifically for us. Of course, there's Games Workshop, classic, dependable, although a little light at 12 milliliters instead of the more classic 17. It's really more of a side than an entree, but I'll forgive it because there's still some pretty good flavor here. Next there's Vallejo, and Vallejo is excellent with an incredible range of both colors and flavors. You can't go wrong with a Vallejo paint. Then you've got Army Painter, very good and pretty cheap with a nice light fruity flavor. And their washes and speed paints are excellent. I never say no to a nice shot of strong tone chased down by some purple alchemy. This is a joke, don't eat paint. I also get a kick out of the weird stuff like artist acrylics, inks, and oils. They're a nice palette cleanser and you cannot beat their unique flavors. And there's always new stuff coming out like Duncan Rhodes Tooth and Coats paints, although I'm personally waiting for Louise's Goblin colors to launch. Really excited to give those a try. There are so many options out there, I can't make up my mind which one I want to use, so I can use these. These are the paints I used as a child to do finger painting with. You know, it was like a couple weeks ago. Some of these paints are over 20 years old. So in addition to figuring out how good are they as paint, I'm also going to be seeing if they've actually held up over the course of time. And they're not gonna be good. I mean, it's craft paint, kind of aimed at children, kind of aimed at like wine moms. There must be some difference between this and standard Warhammer wargaming acrylic paints, like high pigment saturation, high quality paints. Reading the back of the bottle, it says high quality acrylic paint for crafts, excellent coverage, fast drying, allow 1 hour between coats. Is it really fast drying if you're meant to wait an hour between putting on coats of paint? And it also says water-based, non-toxic. Non-toxic, so you know this is junk. When I was a kid, I used these to like paint my Nerf guns and my Legos and like the walls, so I doubt they're gonna be good enough for wargaming miniatures, but who knows? I have a lot of colors here, so I may be surprised. But now it is time to paint! Let's see what I have to work with. I have a good smattering of random colors and this one color called Chocolate Bar, which is pretty much empty, which makes me suspect that Baby J was eating this paint. And I have a few big paints. This Burnt Umber is a good get, and this Vintage White is gonna have to be my only white paint for this project. Apple Barrel is made by a company called Plaid, who makes a lot of paint products. They make paint for Delta, Folk Art, Martha Stewart, that Jailbird, and of course, Apple Barrel. I'm not exactly sure who makes Craft Smart. I suspect it's also Plaid, but I can't find that information because it's absolutely buried under the distributor, Michael's Arts and Craft. I would bet that these paints would behave identically, but to be fair, I'm only going to be using Apple Barrel for this project. I remember Apple Barrel paints having a really strong smell, so... Ooh. It's not super strong, but... Chocolate milk? Okay, whatever. I'm gonna paint a Space Marine. It's my bread and butter. I've painted hundreds of Space Marines, so this should be a perfect test to see what these paints got. But what chapter? I consulted the lore. I love the painting examples shown off in the older codexes. They were not afraid of bright colors back then. I could paint a Marauder Marine. I have a decent yellow color. I could also do Raptors Justice or the Revilers, but those guys are all one color. I need a little variety to properly test this paint, so it looks like the Aurora chapter will be the winner here. All right, time to prime this up and get started. And no, priming is not cheating. I would prime my minis even if I was using my most expensive paints, but I do admit it's probably doing a lot more work keeping this paint stuck than my usual wargaming colors. I went with white, as I doubt these colors will have the pigment saturation to cover my preferred black primer. I put my colors onto the wet palette: gloopy orange, drippy blue, diarrhea green, literally mustard, chunky brown, pretty decent gray, just water. After some vigorous shaking, it turned out to be sky blue, and way too much white. It really launched itself out of the tube. It actually looks like paint, and if I introduce a little water, it thins down kind of nice. And I wonder how they mix. Decently. They actually do mix together. I think I might actually have a shot at a decent looking Space Marine. I shoved some green onto my Marine, and apart from being a little thin on pigment, it behaved nicely. It's got good sticking power and does not dry, leaving behind streaks. It's actually paint. This isn't that bad. I am very pleasantly surprised. I mean, it's not great, but I still have nightmares about the IKEA Mala paint. That paint was unusable, but this is just bad, which is great. That is a green Space Marine after about 10 coats of Apple Barrel Green. I've made up a couple of colors, dark green, sort of dark green, green, light green, and very light green, and now is the real test. I thinned down these colors and started layering them on. The light colors are pretty chalky because the white pigments are probably literally chalk, but it was working out. The paint thinned down nicely and still had good consistency. I only thinned with water, no paint mediums, and the paint performed well. Look at that, it's a very well highlighted marine. I am shocked, I did not see that coming from Apple Barrel paints. The paint is actually behaving really nice. I mean, the finish isn't great, it's a little chalky and desaturated, but the paint is drying a little slower than I'm used to, and so I'm finding it's actually easier to wet blend and glaze than it is with my normal high quality acrylics. So this joke of painting a Space Marine with crap paint is actually turning out to be really fun. And you know what else is really fun? That's right, our Patreon. Over there, we have new STLs available monthly. It's the last chance to get this month's models, the Lord Acolyte, a whole board of Dawn of War inspired Chaos terrain, as well as a welcome pack that includes even more Dawn of War inspired terrain for Space Marines, Imperial Guard, and Eldar, all hosted by Comics, Games, and Things. We also make weekly Patreon exclusive videos and host Discord hangouts. And we have merch, link in the description. I picked up some gray to put this onto his under armor and gun. This covered the white primer pretty well, and it should. I did take care not to get green anywhere but the armor, because I don't think this color would cover dark colors very well. Now it's time for the black paint, and I know exactly what I'm doing with this because I use it about every single day. This black paint is something special. 21985E black is a satin black, and because of that satin finish, it is really dark black. And whatever cheap acrylic gloss medium is in there makes this paint thin down into a surprisingly good wash paint. It's no Games Workshop Null Oil, but it totally does the trick. I put this over the under armor and it shaded the recesses nicely. Also, this paint did a great job of flowing into seams and details in the armor, making those areas stand out. It flowed off the brush right into all the cracks, black lining the armor. I mixed some of that vintage white into the gray to highlight the bolter. Now, I don't own Apple Barrel Red, but I do have a reddish brown, so hopefully this will look red in context. And I highlighted it with the bright neon orange, so it could be argued that that's a dark red bolt gun and not the brown bolt gun that it is. This is fine. I can actually paint with this. All of these colors covered fine, and by fine I mean poorly, but consistently poorly across all the colors, which is actually okay. If you know what you're in for, you can plan accordingly, and that is more than I can say for Games Workshop, who have some colors that are perfection in a bottle, and some colors that are truly crappy. Right now, Apple Barrel Paint is doing a better job, and speaking of Apple Barrel Paints, all I can think about is gotta have them Apple Barrel Paints, boots with the fur, with the whole club looking at. Look at that. If I had not just done it, I would not have believed it. The model is getting really close to being done now. All I have to do is paint on the Aurora chapter symbols. So I'm gonna get to find out if this Apple Barrel 20405 antique white paint is any good on this episode of Will It Freehand. I thinned down the paint and added a little gray to darken it. Then I touched it to the model and it actually covered pretty good. I think the chalky finish of the paint makes for a really nice surface with a lot of grit that holds paint well. In about 3 coats, the color was fully opaque. I used a sharp brush to paint on all 12 of the little points of the Aurora Marine symbol, and I used pure vintage white to paint on some highlights so that these symbols conform to the highlights and shadows I already had on the model. And with my favorite black paint, the little curly Q right in the middle was no problem. It's time to tackle that base, and you know what color I haven't used yet? 20247 Caribbean. Why not? I took this color and slobbered it all over the base. Although it doesn't make much sense for there to be a Caribbean cruise themed base, it does look fun, and Warhammer is set in a sci-fi universe where anything is possible. I added some gray and white to add a little more variety to the ground, and in the end, it looked right, and the blue really makes the green armor stand out. It's time to paint the rim of the base black, which is great because this is the color I always use to paint the rim of the base black with. Then I'm going to be doing a little Space Marine comparison, and comparing the Apple Barrel paint set to the other more Wargamer focused ones. A while ago, I tried painting a Space Marine using only IKEA Mala brand paint that you can find in their children's department, and it was a disaster. That paint is not paint. The only way I could actually get it to stick to the model is by carefully layering on tons of it and then wiping it away with water to reveal a little bit of the white primer underneath. That was the only way I could get any semblance of highlights. We got a great comment on that video saying that IKEA paint only has 2 functions. Children can eat it and not die, and you can wipe it off the walls. And I totally agree. This paint, it was terrible. And I really thought that this is kind of what I was gonna be in for with Apple Barrel paint. But it sorta wasn't. After the IKEA model, I painted up another Space Marine, a classic Ultramarine, using my high quality wargaming acrylic paint, and it turned out perfect. I gave myself a time limit of 2 hours, and I cheated a little bit using the airbrush, but essentially this is a perfect Space Marine. And weirdly, the apple barrel guy is pretty much exactly this good. The apple barrel paints are fine. I mean, they're not great, but they're okay. I am completely shocked. Like, they don't cover as well. They don't have as much pigment, so you need to put on 3 or 4 coats to get good coverage. But that's not crazy compared to the 2 thin coats you need of the normal high quality wargaming paint, which costs a lot more. Like, this is paint. I would say it's much better than children's finger paint. I would say it's at the level of cat lady Etsy store product paint. Like, it's pretty good. It gets the job done. And again, a tube of apple barrel paint is 2 ounces for around 80 cents. Like, that's what I pay for the black apple barrel paint that I use all the time. And that's really, really cheap compared to the 17 milliliters that usually comes with wargaming paint. You could fit 3 wargaming paints, actually 3.5 wargaming paints inside of every bottle of apple barrel paint. And the apple barrel paint is so much cheaper. Like, it is a little bit worse, but if you're looking at that graph, 88 cents of apple barrel gets you most of the way there, and then the high quality paint is, for $3 or $4 extra dollars, it's just a little better. I don't think that the apple barrel paint is that bad. I was looking at paint sets that you can buy, and the Vallejo set was about $25, and the Army Painter set was $35, and they're both very good and came with really good quality colors. The apple barrel paint, the paint set, was $10, and it came with phenomenal colors. Colors like white, paradise pink, candy apple, outrageous orange, lemon, clover fields, Atlantis, primary blue, princess purple, chocolate sprinkle, timeless gray, black. Those are just the best names. Comparing the amount of paint, like the physical amount of paint you get in that paint set versus the wargaming paints, it's pretty wild. I mean, I'm not gonna replace all of my nice paints with apple barrel paints, but I might replace some. Like, there are some colors I use all the time, especially for bases, like an earth tone, burnt umber, raw umber, white, off-white, bone white. I think I'm gonna pick up some apple barrel versions of those colors and see if it will tide me over, will keep those paint colors flowing a lot more, because I've bought 5 Vallejo bottles of earth, and that's only 1.5 apple barrel paints. So I'm flabbergasted. Apple barrel paint is fine. It's not good, but it's fine. And I think this model proves that. It is a very, very nice Space Marine. So this has become a little bit of a series where I paint a Space Marine using weird paint, so let's keep this rolling. If you have any ideas of other weird paint products that I can use to paint a Space Marine, please leave them in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.